But what I've realized is that the reason why we have to separate out marketing and growth is because they don't work with the same process. What I was doing was actually killing our brand because it was just becoming very promotional, very focused on the conversion and not focused on storytelling, not focused on building this relationship, adding broader value. And so we were losing all of that part of it.
Hey, this is where I talk to the best drivers of the direct-to-consumer industry like founders, investors, marketers, CROs, agencies, and dwell into strategies that they've been using to build some great D2C businesses. Let's go on the D2C Drive. I'm your host, Ashish Ramamurthy. Hey guys, what's up? Hey everyone, it's been a great week. I hope you all have been hustling in the season of Q4. Which is really important for all the people in the e-commerce world out there. Hope you're having some amazing sales coming through. Hope your brand is building. All the love from D2C Drive. This is me, Ashish, again, talking to you guys. I think last week we spoke a lot about packaging, right, and community building for direct-to-consumer brands. Today, I have with me a really special guest, Daphne Tideman. She's been heading growth. She's been consulting 200 plus direct-to-consumer brands on their growth. Been a really fan of her myself. Really pleasure to have Daphne today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for having me.
Amazing. So Daphne, let's get right into it. What's your background? Give us a little bit of short 3 minute on what you've been up to. Why direct-to-consumer space? What's going on?
Yeah, so I got into growth actually after having a background in finance, which is quite an unusual path to it. But basically, I studied finance and realized I really hated the banking world and didn't want to focus on just making money for big corporations, but wanted to basically have something more creative and came across growth hacking. So I got back into it when growth hacking wasn't really a thing or anything known, and joined a growth agency. And that's where I worked with so many different brands. A lot was direct to consumer, but there was also B2B and apps as well. And for 5 years, I went from being their first employee to leading a 15 plus team of growth consultants, which was really great because I got to basically, it was kind of meta. I was growing the agency, but I was also growing my clients. So I got to see all different sides of it, but I really missed the impact side of it. So I felt like I was, again, starting as we grew as an agency, we started getting bigger and bigger companies. And my goal has never been to help big companies get bigger, but I really love the startup side of like helping the underdog, helping the new companies rise up and change the industry. So I decided it's time to make a move to an impactful brand and try out also the brand side rather than the consulting side, and became head of growth of Heights, a brain care company. So basically focused on teaching people how to better take care of their brain. And when I joined, we were a very small team. I think we were like 6 or 7 full-timers. And I helped them over 10x their subscriber base over the course of 18 months and really got to grow that. But I started missing the mixture of it and getting to see different brands. So I set up my own consulting and coaching company and started working with only impact brands. So for me, an impact brand is even impact on the environment. So an eco-friendly brand who's focused on sustainability, or an impact on individuals, so wellness brands. So that's really how I made that shift. I was like, I want to choose who I'm working with now rather than just being assigned clients. I want to make sure that the work I'm doing is having that positive impact. And I really love the DTC side because you're so directly connected with the end customer. And so I really zoomed in on that side of things. And now I've been doing that full time since March and really been focused on just working with a wide range of clients. And on the one hand, making sure I keep my hands steady and, working hands-on in different areas, as well as coaching and advising various companies.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that introduction. Recently, I think I went into your website and I downloaded this playbook. You were talking about how growth is different from marketing. And I think a lot of listeners today as well are in the same boat okay, is my marketing initiatives, what should it drive, right? What kind of a brand impact should I have out there? what kind of marketing initiatives should really drive growth, what kind of growth initiatives should I drive for acquisition retention. So there is a difference between the both, right? So let's dive into what are your takes on some of the observations you've had working with direct to consumer brands on both the fronts, right? Where do you see the gap? Where do you see the knowledge gap here coming in, to people?
Yeah. So when I joined Heights, I was very determined to make sure I didn't get a head of marketing role, because the head of marketing role for me is a role that's focused not just on the brand awareness side, but the brand awareness side, acquisition channels, and really how are we bringing people in? I know everyone, when they think of marketing, they think of like the 4Ps and be like, well, that's the original framework we all get taught, but never gets used of, price, placement, promotion, and I always forget the last one, price, placement, promotion,
People
and product. There we go. But what I found in practice is that most of the time, like the product team is focusing on the product, the operations team is focusing really on like the placement side. Price is usually also falling on the product, and it kind of leaves that part of it. And I was like, that's not the part I enjoy. I come from a finance background. I really enjoy looking at all the data and understanding what drives impact. And for me, growth isn't just marketing, but it's product, it's operations, it's culture, it's strategy, it's all these different things that can lead to growth. So I thought I knew the difference, but then I started to basically see that because we didn't have someone leading the marketing side, I was trying to get that, I was kind of getting that team. So the brand like team that would have fallen under either head of content or head of marketing were falling under my team. And at first I was like, this is amazing. We can get them all more data driven rather than just, focusing on posting and softer metrics. And so I started pushing for this growth way of working, of like, let's run experiments and everything. But what I've realized is that the reason why we have to separate out marketing and growth is because they don't work with the same process. What I was doing was actually killing our brand, because it was just becoming very promotional, very focused on the conversion and not focused on storytelling, not focused on building this relationship, adding broader value. And so we were losing all of that part of it. And also it meant that our growth activities were very channel focused, because we were basically a marketing and growth team in one. And it made the people unhappy, because brand people do not care about the conversions. They want to be able to focus on big ideas, and like using frameworks like ICE just kills all these big impact brand ideas that, really set brands apart. But it was also meaning that we weren't making the most impact because we were just focused on one part of it. So what I did was I split it out and had the marketing team who was focused more on like, ongoing acquisition things, brand side, and then the growth team. And the growth team I always see as kind of like the squad that's available to really zoom in on the biggest growth channel. And when you split that out from marketing, you look at growth more holistically. And that means that, maybe retention is the opportunity, maybe operations is the opportunity, maybe pricing strategy is the opportunity. It depends. But by not focusing on it from a marketing lens, you can look far more holistically and allow each team to have their own KPIs and their own process rather than trying to shove it all in one. So that's why I found it really important to distinguish between the two and really explain like when is something marketing, when is something growth. And there's definitely overlap. I'm not going to pretend it's not. I've also created Venn diagrams where I've shown like marketing, product growth and all the overlap there is. But it's more about having a structure where you are able to split out the things that are purely growth and purely marketing, which, if we look purely at marketing, some parts might fall under the growth process. Sometimes we do have acquisition parts under the growth process, but things like brand and building the brand, the content strategy, PR, all that stuff, that should, in my opinion, never sit under the growth process.
Yeah. I think a lot of SaaS people understand that because, hey, with product-led growth coming into play, community-led growth coming into play, there is clearly distinguishes going along. But I think as a consumer brand, one, your manufacturing unit should be really great. Second, your marketing unit should be really great. Third, you should just make sure you have a sustainable growth, right? Especially if you're starting out, looking at least the initial 5 years into the game, right? So from the last 3 years, I think a lot of things have changed in the way we've we've been buying. While retail, while offline is still the place to go to build relationships, people are turning out to buy online all the time. Huge sales going along. So, what are some of the observations from, okay, are direct to consumer brands suffering from acquisition right now, retention right now, sustainability right now? What are your some of the thoughts on that?
Yeah. So what I see happening is that basically we aren't getting more and more acquisition channels at the rate that we were before. You know, if we look 5 years back, we had quite a few new channels that were joining. Channels were very much innovating, adding new placements, adding new formats, and there were more opportunities for it. But in the last few years, the only really big channel we've had is TikTok, which everyone is jumping on whether or not it's right for them or not. And other than that, we haven't really had any of these new channels, which means that we're getting more and more competition because with the pandemic, a lot of brands switched online, switched to focusing more online than their offline. They couldn't just, continue with the offline because people couldn't shop. And it's meant that acquisition costs are continuing to rise and continuing to grow. But what I'm seeing is then people are still focusing on those same kind of channels. They want to be on Facebook ads, they want to be on Google ads, they want to be on email, and the competition is getting more and more. And, we're not able to really drive that cost of acquisition down to the same levels that we were enjoying, a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And as a result, it's getting harder and harder to compete, especially when we add to the mix Amazon, which in the UK here is growing hugely and is just adding so much ease to shopping. It's no longer enough to be like, okay, we have a good e-com experience. Like that's the foundation now. The foundation is we basically already need to have like a good site. We need to have good delivery terms, like in terms of delivery time and free shipping, because otherwise we're going to lose people. And that combined with those high acquisition costs have meant that we really need to focus in on two areas. The first, I believe, is brand. So even though I split out brand from growth, that's not to say brand doesn't lead to growth. It just means it needs a different process. I believe that the brands that are successful right now are the ones who are really building their own tone of voice, standing out, because that gives people a reason to buy from them directly and to feel an association with them versus just going to Amazon where they're going to be losing a huge amount of margin to Amazon because those fees are not fun. Right. And then the other thing is retention side. So it's no longer good enough to just have okay-ish product market fit, get some VC funding in, spend that all on acquisition, drive, growth at all costs used to be the thing. What's the growth percentage? Like really aggressive focus on acquisition because that's what the VCs wanted to see. And then we'll figure out the product market fit later, or we'll figure out the retention issue later on. We can't do that anymore because a retention issue means we're going to have a lifetime value issue, which means we can't afford the acquisition costs. Yeah. So to be able to compete at the moment, we really, really need to focus on retention and product market fit. And this topic that when I used to talk about it a year or two ago, it was kind of unsexy. It didn't get the same reach as my other content. I recently did a poll on poll on LinkedIn, where it was like, what do you want to hear about? I'm doing a collaboration with LinkedIn as a creator. I want to talk about the messy reality of growing a DTC business. Do you want to hear about growth team and stakeholder management? Do you want to hear about setting up your growth process, product market fit, or something else? I thought everyone was going to say growth team, stakeholder management, because that's what people complain to me about. Product market fit got over 50% of the votes.
Wow.
And I think people are starting to realize like we have to figure this part out because we can't survive otherwise.
Okay, so let's talk about brand and retention. So first, retention, right? Does somebody go focusing on retention from day 0 or day 100? What are the things that drive retention, right? While we have heard, emails you set up good emails, you set up good automatic reminders, all of that people know. People have been able to draw that, but now retention should be across the board, right? Your consumer experience is just not your website, but there's a lot more elements to it. Yeah. How do you think somebody should look at the retention stack? Right?
Yeah, so email is only a tiny bit of retention. It's basically solving the trigger point of like how are we triggering people to come back. I think step one, before you even like focus on retention, is like getting the product market fit right. Do we actually have a product that the market wants? And have we managed to work out the right business model for it to set it up for success and worked out the right language around it? Because otherwise, you're trying to stick a plaster on it, like we'll just send more emails. But if you haven't actually tested for product market fit, whether you use the traditional Sean Ellis survey of like how disappointed would you be, or you use, for example, that you look at your retention metrics, your referral metrics, and see how those are performing. Because if you have product market fit, you should be seeing a healthy amount of referral. I think that's step one. If you feel like, hey, that foundation is right, but we still have room for improvement, what I would do is I would look at where are we actually losing people? So not just like what is the monthly churn rate, but what is the drop off per month or per like cycle of your cohort? Because some products are monthly, some products are weekly, daily. Like where is that drop off? And is it that people are never actually using the product? So they're dropping off before they're hitting the aha moment. They've never gotten the value. So like, for example, for a food subscription, that would be that they order one box and never order again. Or is it that after a few boxes, they stop? Because these are different areas that we need to focus on. With the first one, it's working out like, why are they not getting the value? What is the aha moment? How can we help them reach it and make sure that we set everything up for success that they reach it? Like, for example, if you see HelloFresh, like I'm not saying I agree with their heavy discount strategy, but they are very focused on making sure you get to box 3 or 4 because they know that just one box isn't enough for you to enjoy it and really get the value. They know that if someone's doing 3 or 4 boxes, they're more likely, so they discount longer. Again, not saying that's right. I think it's also hurt their growth in a lot of ways, but I'm just saying that like, we need to work out what is that moment where they have that aha moment and how can we get them there? Versus retention, I always talk about a habit loop. And with a habit loop, the trigger is just one part. It's about figuring out also, like, if we look at the NIL habit loop model, it's working out, like, what is actually the action we want them to take? What is the reward? Which rewards really matter to them? And how can we get them to start investing in it? So a lot of time with DTC products, it's like there's less of an investment because it's, like, okay, we buy a product and then we try it out and then we don't have any control of whether they're using it. But we can help them invest by really understanding who our customers are. So one way we can do this to improve retention rather than just focusing on email is like, well, what if we do a quiz? What if we ask them what they're actually struggling with? What if we provide, personalized advice to them and a personalized experience, also not just in the email, but also in when we receive the product, what they get with it. And just really creating this feeling of like, hey, I've explained to this brand what I need. I've invested and taken the time to let them know who I am. And as a result, I'm getting a really personalized experience that's helping me enjoy the value of it. Or is it around helping them create a habit of using the product? Like there's different things. It just depends on what part of that loop isn't working.
Awesome. So I think you nailed the point here. When I go and see someone not having forms right now to ask what people know and just throw in those, okay, give me your email ID, here is a discount. I'm like, I feel so sad for those guys, right? That, hey, a simple quiz that, hey, understanding, if you're a skincare brand, understanding what kind of skin issues somebody is having, how much times do they use a skin brand, anything right now to apply on the skin, right? Becomes that first party data that they need to, capture so that, hey, even when I'm in their own website, or if they're sending an email back again, the experience that they should give to people should be really personalized, right? So some of the things that like I've been hearing, and a lot of people want to know more about how to personalize their experience, not just in their website but across, right? And also understanding customer data is becoming so important right now nowadays that people are like, hey, we just can rely on our first party customer data to do stuff, right? So coming on brand building, yes, a lot of them go into, yes, education, inspire, empower, those big terms and draw their marketing campaigns around that. But what have you seen? You must have observed a lot of small brands come into play, have really strong playbook, right, for their brand. What are some of the observations? What are some of the use cases that you have seen from building a brand?
So I personally really love the challenger brand approach. So really disrupting and creating a new category. I think it does still really stand out, and it also really helps drive home what the value proposition is, because I think one of the biggest fails I see is just not having a clear enough value proposition. So just talking about very similar things to the brands out there, because that's what everyone's talking about. And I saw also someone posted this on LinkedIn today, where they were saying people like brands who follow their competition, they fail. The brands who understand their customers, they succeed. And so I think like what challenger brands do really well is they understand what matters to their customer, and they understand what change they're trying to drive, and they inspire this bigger mission. And I think that's what also gets their customer inspired and excited about it, because they're really helping them see like how they're making a change. So an example of this is like All Plants. They are not trying to get people to be vegan, but they're trying to get people to eat more plant-based. And so all their messaging, also in the box when you receive it, All Plants, by the way, for people who don't know it, it's a vegan freezer food subscription. So you get freshly prepared, chef prepared meals that you can put in your freezer and just heat up in your oven or your microwave. So it's a very easy way to eat healthy without having to cook, and to eat vegan, so fully plant-based. And so they're not trying to get people to be vegan, plant-based, but like even in their like box, they're saying like, by doing this, you're helping reduce our meat consumption. You're having this kind of CO2 impact.
Right.
Encourage your friends and family to do the same. And I think that is way more powerful messaging, because then I'm trying to drive a change with this brand.
Right.
And BrewDog is another good example of this. I know they got a lot of negative press. I seem to be mentioning negative press examples, but they got a lot of negative press about how they ran the company. But if we look from like an outside brand perspective, they killed it, because they were really a challenger brand in the beer industry, actually saying like, hey, we want to be carbon negative. We want to have that positive environment impact. This is the impact that the beer industry has, and this is what we're going to change. And we're going to also create really coolly named, really funky cans that stand out and that people, are excited to drink.
Yeah. On another note, even in India here, right? So I recently saw a brand. So while a lot of things that we put on our skin is very chemical based, they created this brand where all of their ingredients are natural, right?
Yeah.
So that it just not just blends in with your skin, it just makes it more better. And through that, they're like, hey, skin health is really important. You need to make sure that your skin health is driven by natural stuff. And that's where they're able to, tell people to be a part of this movement. And it's really amazing that the kind of, as you said, impactful thought process is coming in, because we were so restricted with just impactful messaging until this point of time. But now I think it's changing into something called as impactful brand strategy, which I think you've been talking about, and we've been seeing out there as well. And I think let's make sure our listeners think about that when they're trying to build a brand, because that can be a great differentiator when you go out there and don't want to fight for those profit margins or shelf placements or all of those Amazon ads that you run for and you don't get sales out of it. You might be missing on this impactful brand strategy piece.
Yeah.
So you talked about how you can drive all of this, right? But what's important when you consume external playbooks and all that is internalizing these processes within your team. It becomes that important factor to really create success out of it, right? And that's where I think you come into play. You've been talking about how this should be played along within different teams. How should the structure be? Please feel free to share those nuggets with our listeners.
Yeah. So by the way, just before we move on to that, I'd like to say, I really like the distinguish between impactful brand and impactful messaging. I think that's such a good thing to differentiate, because a lot of brands are like, we're going to be an impact brand, and they just design their messaging, versus creating really strong also internal values of like, what do we stand for as a brand, and how does this drive every single decision we have? So, you know, what I loved at Heights was that we had our brand values, and they were also our internal values. And as a result, with everything we did, from our packaging to our website design to every little bit, we were able to live up to those brand values, because they drove all of our decisions. So, you know, we were very focused on like our customers first, to be trusted and to be trustworthy. And like that meant that like when we were deciding on things, it's like, does this invoke trust? Does this, you know, put our customers first? And that's when you see it across the brand, versus, you know, just having it as like, this is our messaging, and there's this disconnect of the team. So I just wanted to add that, because I think it could be really lost, because it's just something you said as we were talking about it, but I think it's a really nice way to distinguish it.
Yeah, I believe you. I mean, the only brands which I'm able to see nowadays, right, on Instagram or whoever pings me this amazing brand, they all have a great website. They all provide an experience for their users. When I go to their social media and follow their content, it's not anymore about their products, right? It's all about the lifestyle. It's all about like the kind of like change they want to bring into people, right? Even it can be a simple thing that, hey, by wearing these glasses, you seem to be more confident. Can be a really simple strong thing to someone, because hey, I've had this experience where I didn't have the money to buy shoes for a long time in my life, but when I bought one, I felt really amazing, right? That I ran a marathon with it. I became a runner. I became a trekker. I became a nature lover, right? So see that one shoe which created an entire difference, right? Just take those stories, just take these kind of stories and play it along, and just make sure that this is not just one person but millions of them living this lifestyle. I mean, great kudos to Nike for bringing it from a long time, and now people are realizing, hey, we need to build this grounds up. So coming to second part of the system, you were talking about internalizing, right? How should team structures be? What kind of processes do they need to follow? How should they merge together to bring these values to their customers and also within themselves? What are your takes on that?
So I think in terms of team structure, we've already covered the first part, where I don't think you should just have like one brand growth marketing team, but spitting it out. What team structure then works really depends on the organization. So what I usually do, let's start with how to work it out, and then I'll give some options of different structures. So what I really start with is like, what's our North Star metric? What are we trying to achieve? So what's the higher level goal that's guiding us? And that shows that we're driving value for our customers and for the business. What are like the sub KPIs of that are, closely linked to it, the growth levers? And what is going to be, like the main focus points for the coming years in terms of those growth levers? And you don't know exactly what you're going to focus on in 2 years. I always say new growth level, new growth challenge, or growth devil. But you do know at least in like the next year, like, okay, we're really going to have a strong focus on retention. Or we know that based on our growth model and based on those key KPIs, that referral is going to be a major lever for us. And also building, brand awareness in, for example. Just depends on the business, what matters more for them and what kind of channels they're using, and also how much their product-led growth. We're talking about DTC, so there's slightly less product-led growth than it for a SaaS company, but that doesn't mean you can't combine the product-led growth with the more traditional marketing-led growth. It won't be as heavily product team. So with a SaaS company, you quite often put the growth team under product because it's almost only product-led growth, versus with a DTC team, it's going to be more of a mix of the two. And it also depends on like what falls on the product. So once you know, this is our North Star metric, these are clear growth levers. This is our growth model. This is how we grow, and that everyone in the organization knows this is how we grow. You can then start to see, like, based on that, who should be in that growth team and what structure makes sense. And there's 3 key growth models that I work with. So the first one is the independent growth model. Here we have the different people reporting directly into a head of growth, VP of growth, or, once you're slightly bigger, it'll probably be someone leading like acquisition side, someone leading activation, someone leading retention. You'll be splitting it out. But just starting with that first model, it's probably going to be a more head of growth. They're going to have like a developer, designer, a brand manager, a growth PM, these kind of people in their team, CRO specialists. It just depends on what the focus is in terms of growth. And they are leading that team. What's really nice about this is you have a separate team that's focused on growth, which means you don't have constraints of resources, you don't have concerns about it, and they're all focused on growth. The downside is you have someone leading these team members who is not a specialist in their area, which can hold back the growth of those individuals and like how they feel like connected to the other teams. And it also means that you have to have enough work for them all the time, which I think, especially with the smaller startups, is more of a challenge. But this is a very famous model that has been used like companies like Facebook for driving growth. The second model is cross-functional. And here we don't have a separate head of growth leading, growth team. We have the different teams. So let's say marketing, or you might have brand marketing, you might have product, you might have engineering. Again, depends, customer care, because I think they're also a really key part of the growth team for most DTC brands.
Yeah.
And then you have a cross-functional growth team, and the growth lead is usually like a growth product manager or a growth manager, and they will either report into the head of product or the head of marketing and report into one of those, but they won't be like a separate division and on the same level. What's great about this is that we get very good cross-functional collaboration. People are reporting into the people who have their areas of expertise. Like, it's a very fluid structure, so it's very easy to go in and out of the growth team based on what the resources need per quarter. But the downside to this is the fact that whoever the growth PM reports into, that's what growth is going to be seen more as. So what with that challenge we talked about, like growth being seen as marketing or growth being seen as product, it's kind of like where can we put the blame? There's also like less ownership because it's spread across different departments versus, which can be good because it means everyone feels responsible for growth versus let's shove it over to this growth team and they solve it. But it can also mean that business as usual, day-to-day work gets in the way of growth. And so then the final structure is called the mixed model, which is a very creative name of basically saying, let's take both models and mix it up, where we have this cross-functional aspect. And I'll try to also make sure that we can attach an article that has all these diagrams so people can also visualize it, because I think growth teams are a very visual thing. But we also have a separate like head of growth or like a growth lead who will have like, 1 or 2 people reporting into them, as well as working with this cross-functional team. And that's actually the structure I had at Heights too. And what I like about the mixed model is that we do have people specialized in growth. Growth isn't said to be just one department. Everyone is involved in growth. And we have those growth experts on board, but we're able again to have the benefits of the cross-functional model. It's more fluid. We can bring people in and out. But the downside is still like getting people from other departments to feel the same commitment versus being like, okay, but those people are officially growth and we're just helping out, is I think a bit of a challenge. And it's also like reporting lines, making sure it's not getting too messy or too confusing in terms of like, they basically have their cross-functional team, they're reporting into a head of product, head of engineering, etc. But then where does that head of growth or head of acquisition or head of retention fall? Like, do they have to listen to them, or are they just deciding like their tasks? And the way I usually explain it is like you have deciding what you're working on is sitting with the growth person, and the actual management of, your day-to-day, like your own personal development, that's still sitting with your lead. So those are kind of the 3 options and that I usually start with. And so once we know what we're focusing on, we can then start to choose which option best suits us, or even create like, a further hybrid of it and just work out what works for us, because it will really vary per organization. And maybe you start with one and end up changing it depending on what you see is working and not. But just keep in mind that, it's going to move. If you're just starting out with a small organization, it's going to move from 1 to 2 to 3 teams, which structure also nicely scales with that.
Sounds good. So, yeah, folks. So Daphne will share an article so that you guys can download this. So you'll find this in the transcript for the podcast. So Daphne, thanks so much for coming in. Any last thoughts or advices in terms of, especially if you're a direct-to-consumer brand looking at the next 3 years, what should they focus on?
So I would say retention, retention, retention. Like, I think there's this big shift to focusing on customer value and what's driving value for this customer. And I would say, like, really focus down on that. And especially with like changing economic crises, just because you had product market fit, it doesn't mean you're going to keep it. So just also be constantly looking at, like, do we still have product market fit? Who do we have product market fit with? And has that changed because of the economic crisis? Like, is it that certain people are less elastic because their need is like more of a painkiller versus a vitamin? And how can we really double down on those people and understand what they need and drive value for them? Awesome. And I think, like, when brands do this, acquisition naturally becomes easier because we know how to communicate. We're getting more referral. People are staying longer, so we're able to spend more. And that's what will drive growth, I think, for the next 3 years.
Awesome. That really sounds like an amazing prescription given to all of the people today. So guys, retention, retention, retention. There you go. That's the line for today. Thank you so much for joining in. I had a wonderful time with you. Let's hope also we'll do more of these sessions, collaborate more on retention playbooks for all of the direct-to-consumer brands. And hope you all have a great Q4. And yeah, wishing you all a prosperous 2023 right now itself.
Thank you.
Thank you.